Hare Krishna, everyone. Hope you're all well. Hope you had a wonderful Diwali and Happy New Year to everyone. So today we're going to start with Canto 8, Withdrawal of the Cosmic Creation, and it's Chapter 1, the Manus Administration of the Universe. So our guest speaker is none other than Bhaja Govind Prabhu. So welcome back, Prabhuji. I hope you're well. Hare Krishna, over to you.
Hare Krishna, thank you. It's nice to be back. I think last time I was here was start of the year, I think. So almost a full year has gone by. That's nice. So start with Mangalacharn. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadati Svapadantikam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shubhad Ki Jai. Thank you so much for having me back. So I believe today we are looking at Canto 8 and specifically Chapter 1. So Canto 8 is entitled The Withdrawal of the Cosmic Creations, and Chapter 1 is the Manus, Administrators of the Universe. So it's a really interesting, a nice chapter, because there's one verse near the end on verse 32, which I thought would be nice to start a meditation first on the glory of the Srimad Bhagavatam using this verse. And it goes, Tatkatha submahat punyam dhanyam swastya yanam shubham yatra yatro tamashloko bhagavan giyate hari. Translation: any literature or narration in which the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Uttama Shloka, is described and glorified is certainly great, pure, glorious, auspicious, and all good. And I think it's such a beautiful verse because not only is this verse the verse is talking about how glorious any literature is that describes the Supreme Lord. But as we know, the Srimad Bhagavatam is also a Grantavatar. It's the literature incarnation of the Supreme Lord. So what an amazing opportunity to actually connect with not just glorifications of the Supreme Lord, but the Supreme Lord himself, which brings, as the verse says, glorious, which is glorious, auspicious, and all good. So just a shout out to Dharmendra and the team who week in, week out get to associate with Krishna, get to associate with the glories of Krishna through these sessions, and to anybody who actually joins these sessions on a regular basis. So to start off, I guess since we're starting a new canto, what has been covered thus far are 7 cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? And various pastimes have happened, various narrations, various descriptions of the Supreme Lord in different sections. For those of you who have been around for many cantos, you'll recognize Canto 5 with all of the technical aspects of the universe and the cosmology and so many different features. And in Canto 2, it's described that there are 10 topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Atra sarga visargascha sthanam poshna muteha manvantara ishanukata nirodha muktir ashraya. It's described that the Srimad Bhagavatam actually consists of 10 topics. And when we go through, the Acharyas explain that each canto has many of these topics, more than one. But each canto is predominated by at least one of these topics. Canto 1 and 2 are quite interesting because they're unique. They don't really fall under the predominance of these 10 topics because Canto 1 is very much about the adhikar, the qualification to enter the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then Canto 2 is very much about the sadhana or the practice and the mood and meditation for one to enter deep into the Srimad Bhagavatam. But when we look at Cantos 3 to 7, we see that they very much go through some of these topics. So Canto 3 is very much about Sarga, which is the primary creation, how the Lord creates the material universe. Then Canto 4 is predominated with Visarga, which is the secondary creation by Lord Brahma, how Brahma engineers the universe, how he populates the universe. Then Canto 5 we see is Sthanam. Sthana, many of us will know, is around the position, the sthan, the position. And so here in Canto 5 we see that there's many descriptions and explanations of the position of the different living entities in the different planetary systems. Then in Canto 6, Bhoshanam. Bhosha means protection. So we see how the Lord protects his devotees in Canto 6 very much, like we hear the Ajmal pastime, the Chitketu Maharaj pastime, all these things. And then Canto 7 we see is Uti. Uti means the creative impetus. So how material desires, material intentions will create material, it'll create something material, and then spiritual desires will create some spiritual success and spiritual aspirations. And then Canto 8. Canto 8 is predominated with the topic of Manvantara. Manvantara means the descriptions of the change of Manus, how the Manus are, how we go through the different Manus, how the Manus are changing, and descriptions of all of the Manus. And so what we see in Canto 8, as we go through the chapters, as you go through for the next many weeks, you see that what's happening is that a day of Brahma is being described. Brahma lives for 100 years, not of Earth years, but in his calculations, 100 years. And one day of Brahma has 14 Manus. And what is a Manu? A Manu is a leader of the universe. And so when we talk about 14 Manus, Manvantara is basically time periods, is the time that one Manu reigns, one Manu rules. And so if you break down Brahma's one day, then there's 14 Manus or 14 time periods. And within each of those time periods, there's one Manu, there's one ruler for that time period. And so when we go through the canto, we'll see that at various points, as Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj are discussing the pastimes or discussing the Srimad Bhagavatam, then we see that Shukadeva Goswami is going through the 14 Manus one by one. And at various break points, Parikshit Maharaj will inquire, will ask about some pastimes that happen in that Manu. And then we hear narrations. So the three predominant ones that we hear about are the Gajendra Moksha pastime, right? So at the very beginning of Canto 8, just after the first chapter, we get into the Gajendra Moksha pastime. The pastime where the king elephant is stuck in a water fighting a crocodile and Lord Hari comes and saves him. That's a description of a pastime in the fourth Manu. Then later on we'll hear about the sixth Manu and the pastime of the churning of the milk ocean, where for the first time in the history of mankind, the demons and the demigods come together and churn the ocean to get some nectar out of it. And many, many pastimes happen just around this one pastime. And then we hear about, as the seventh Manu is described, we hear about Bali Maharaj and Vamana Dev. Vamana, the dwarf incarnation of the Supreme Lord. That dwarf, that cute, sweet, childlike form of the Supreme Lord, who comes up to Bali Maharaj, the king, who is performing so many yagnas just to rule over the entire universe, and begs for 3 steps of land. And in the first 2 steps, Vamanadev takes over everything that Bali Maharaj possesses. And in the 3rd step, he takes Bali Maharaj himself by putting his foot on top of Bali Maharaj's head. And so like this, we'll hear about the different pastimes of the Lord through a whole day of Brahma, through the whole of Canto 8. And what's really interesting is that up until now, we've gone through 7 cantos, and we've only heard about 1 Manu thus far, and that's Swayambhuva Manu. Predominantly, we hear about him in cantos 3 and 5, him or his lineage. And who is Swayambhuva Manu? He is the son of Brahma. He's the son of Brahma who agreed and accepted to assist Brahma in his service of populating the universe. And so through Cantos 3 and 5, we hear about the different pastimes related to his sons and his daughters and their lineage and, like how they get married, how they have children, what their children are like, etc., etc. So we hear all of these different narrations from Cantos 1 to 7. And at certain points, based on Parikshit's curiosity, we hear that Parikshit Maharaj then hears something from Shukadev Goswami, and then he's like, okay, tell me a bit more about this topic. And so then Shukadev Goswami then starts narrating some other pastime or some other description related to what Parikshit Maharaj had asked. But then it keeps coming back to Swayambhuva Manu and his lineage throughout Cantos 1 to 7, or well, predominantly 2 to 7 rather. And so that's why we hear, for example, the pastime of Ajamel or the pastime of Chitketu Maharaj and Vlad Maharaj and things like that. And so when we come to Canto 8, and we look at a summary of what chapter 1 is really about, we see that Parikshit Maharaj is very content in hearing so much about Swayambhuva Manu and his lineage, but he's now curious to hear about the other Manus, because he's heard so much about Swayambhuva Manu. And so at the very beginning of chapter 1, the chapter that we're discussing today, we hear Parikshit Maharaj speaking to Shukadev Goswami that, oh, it's great that I've heard so much about the first Manu, but I want to hear about all these other Manus too, so please tell me something. And so Shukadev Goswami, like any expert narrator, he picks up from where he left off. So he left off previously talking about Swayambhuva Manu's children, but now that he's being asked to speak about other Manus, what Shukadev Goswami does is he first describes how Swayambhuva Manu retired from his kingly affairs. And as he's doing that, he describes how Swayambhuva Manu went to the forest with his wife, performed austerities for 100 years, and out of his ecstasy, he falls into a trance. And when he falls into a trance, demons and rakshasas start chasing after Swayambhuva Manu in order to devour him, in order to eat him. But the Supreme Lord then comes and saves the day as he does. So the Lord comes, protects Swayambhuva Manu, and then we hear Shukadev Goswami then describing and starting to narrate and describe the next Manus, how from there, second Manu came. And we don't just hear about the Manu himself, we hear about a description of the Manu, we just hear about the description of prominent personalities in that Manvantara. And these prominent personalities, like the demigods, like Indra, like Manu himself, like the 7 great sages, these are all personalities that are considered to be Shaktivesh avatars, or empowered incarnations of the Lord. Because they have a specific purpose, they have a specific duty to fulfill. The Lord empowers them himself. And sometimes what happens is that, like in the case of Indra, so just after describing Swayambhuva Manu's retirement and how the demons were trying to devour Swayambhuva Manu, Shukadev Goswami explains that actually the Lord who had come to protect Swayambhuva Manu actually became Indra himself. Because sometimes what happens is that there's nobody who is qualified to actually take on the position of that post. All these high positions or posts like the demigods, Indra, etc. These we consider to be people, but actually the posts, the designations. And so if one is qualified, they can take up, in their next life, if they're qualified, they can take up one of those roles. But if nobody is qualified, then the Lord himself comes to actually take that role on. Just like if you think of any corporate company, you have so many people at a C-level. You have a CEO, CTO, CFO, financial officer, technology officer, information officer, all these different chief executive or chief roles. But what happens when he leaves or she leaves? Well, somebody else comes in and replaces them. But until that somebody comes who is qualified to take that position on, one of the existing people, maybe the CEO himself, will take on that role on an interim basis until somebody is ready to take on the permanent position again. And so like that, we see that Shukadev Goswami then starts narrating and describing the different Manus. And when he gets to the 4th Manu, Then very briefly, Shukadev Goswami mentions in passing that Lord Hari comes to save Gajendra. And Pariksha Maharaj then picks up on that point and asks, tell me about this pastime, which is how we come to the Gajendra Moksha in the next chapters. And what I was thinking about is because I could sit here and talk about the Manus and the personalities and try and describe them. And I'll be honest, it'll just go over my head because it'll be like so many technicalities, so many names and descriptions. I could do that. But what I was thinking was, what is this chapter really teaching us? What should we take away from the chapter other than how the Bhagavatam is progressing from one chapter to the other? And so what was coming to my mind was, it's such an interesting point that Parikshit Maharaj, who is always constantly throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, asking Shukadev Goswami to describe pastimes related to the Supreme Lord, to describe his narrations, to describe his different forms, to elaborate on certain pastimes that the Lord has with his devotees. At the very beginning of this chapter, he's asking about the other Manus. So I was wondering, why is this? Why is Pariksha Maharaj actually asking about the Manus instead of just hearing Katha, Harikatha, directly related to the Supreme Lord? And at the very beginning of the chapter, let's bring it up. At the very beginning of the chapter, we see that a very obvious answer is given because in verse 2, Pariksha Maharaj says, O learned Brahmana, Shukadev Goswami, the great learned persons who are completely intelligent describe the activities and appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead during the various manvantaras. We are very eager to hear about these narrations. Kindly describe them. So the very obvious answer is that Parikshit is curious to hear about other pastimes related to the Lord in different manus, in different manvantaras. But he could have just asked directly, tell me about other pastimes related to the Lord in different manvantaras. But he very specifically asks about the other manus also, and Shukadev Goswami takes the time to describe who is the manu, who are the prominent personalities there. And so what I was thinking was it would be really nice to just explore this idea, because what we see in the middle section of the chapter is a glorification of the Supreme Lord given by Swayambhuva Manu. And specifically when we think about Manus, what are Manus? I describe them to be the leaders of the universe, right? Raja Rishis, saintly kings. And so when we talk about Manus, we see that they're actually spiritual leaders of society. From them, we have the Manu Smritis and the Manu Shastras, the codes of what human life is really meant, or civilized human life is meant to be like. And so they're setting the path for all of us citizens of the universe and how to make progress in life. But the key thing is that because they are Raja Rishis, they are saintly kings, their leadership is not just about us making progress in this life. It's about making spiritual progress as well. It's about making progress in our eternal existence. Some of us may be thinking, well, okay, why is that important? Why do I need to know about what a leader is meant to be like? I'm not a leader. Not everybody aspires to be leading a country or a company. But we're all leaders. We're all leaders in different ways. Because what does it mean to be a leader? Being a leader means that we are utilizing our influence, right? We all have a certain influence in life and we're utilizing that for a purpose. So if we're a parent, we're a leader because we're meant to be looking at leading our children to live a nice, healthy, good spiritual life. If we're a husband or a wife, we're leaders for our partners. If we're a guru or a teacher or a mentor, we're leaders for people, for our subordinates. And even if we're none of those things, if we are aspiring to take our life to somewhere progressive, we're a self-leader because we're leading ourselves. And so this topic of what is the consciousness, what is the activity, what are the activities, what are the thoughts of a leader are actually very, very important for all of us. And what's really nice in this chapter is from verses 9 till 16, we see that through the retirement plans of Swayambhuva Manu, we hear about his glorification of the Supreme Lord, which gives us insight into the heart and mind of the ideal king. We actually get entrance into a leader's meditation such that we can also take lessons to inspire our own direction in life in terms of how we want to move forward, how we want to help others move forward. And so what I thought is, with whatever time we have remaining, just go through these verses 9 to 16 and try and really pick out a lesson that we can learn around the meditation. So I have it up because I'm just going to read the verses out. I think I'll just read them and not present. So, yeah. So text 9. Lord Manu said, the Supreme Living Being has created this material world of animation. It is not that he was created by this material world. When everything is silent, the Supreme Being stays awake as a witness. The living entity does not know him, but he knows everything. So one of the things that we have, thank you, Dharmendra. So one of the things that I take away from this is a spiritual leader remembers that it all begins with God. In this verse, we see that Swayambhuva Manu is very much talking about how the Lord created everything, the material world. In the Bhagavad Gita, we know there's that verse, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matta sarvam pravartate, where Krishna says that he is actually the creator of the material and spiritual worlds. It's actually from him that everything that exists comes into being. And so in our little worlds, we may think, some people may think that, oh, I've created this big, big building. I've created this business, this empire. I'm ruling a country if we're the prime minister or the president. But the question to ask is, and the meditation to have is, did we create it? We may think that we have pioneered something amazing, that we have created the big building. But the resources were there in the first place. Everything was there for us to just take over. If we're ruling a country, if we're ruling a community, well, what about before we were born? That country was still there, that community was still there. The resources may be in a different place, in a different environment, but everything was still there. So what pride can we actually have about being a creator of something here? Because the funny thing is that we may say we created this business, we may say we are ruling the country, but the stock market could crash like that and our business will collapse. The election time may come and we may find that the next prime minister or the next president is no longer us. We may we may construct a big building, but an earthquake will happen and the entire building will become rubble. So what pride can we actually have about creating anything? In the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about how it's just, everything's just like a dream. And isn't that just a dream? Isn't it just like a dream? In a dream, what happens? In a dream, we may have a dream where we're in a massive golden palace, sitting on a golden throne, or lying down on a golden throne, looking down 50 steps and just waving at the people on the ground and just encouraging them to do some singing and dancing for entertainment. We'll clap our hands and a servant will come and put some grapes in our mouth. But then, like a flash, you wake up and you realize that none of that was yours to begin with because it was just a dream. It was just a dream created by imagination. And so spiritual leaders recognize that actually this whole material world is just like a dream created by the external energy of the Supreme Lord. So it's not ours to begin with. And so a spiritual leader constantly reminds himself or herself and humbles himself by remembering that actually everything is all a part of God's creation. And God's just given us the facilities to act out in whatever capacity we have for a temporary period of time. So where's the question of being prideful? Where's the question of having any sort of puffed up ego? Verse 10. Within this universe, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his Super Soul feature, is present everywhere. Wherever there are animate or inanimate beings, therefore one should accept only that which is allotted to him. One should not desire to infringe upon the property of others. In verse 10, the lesson that I took away is that a spiritual leader sees everything belongs to God. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about this idea of communism. Communism is where you've got a country or a state, like you've got a community, let's stick with a country, and everything that happens in that country belongs to the country. So if there's a business, if there's land, if there's wealth, if there's agriculture, if there are buildings, it all belongs to the country. And what happens is that according to one's needs and means, the country will then distribute all of that for the citizens to then occupy. Oh, Dharmendra, it's just you and your wife? Okay, you'll get this much land and this much, money to survive and agriculture to cultivate. Oh, Lydia, you've got 5 people in your family. Okay, you'll have more than Dharmendra because you need more. So everything is ruled by what the country is directing. And oftentimes when we hear Srila Prabhupada's lectures or purports, and even in this purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about this idea of the ultimate communism, i.e., where everything belongs to Krishna. Nothing belongs to us, everything belongs to Krishna. Even this body, which the Bhagavad Gita describes to be like a yantra, which is a machine, because a machine helps you achieve things, which is what the body helps us do. Even that belongs to Krishna. And so a Raja Rishi is ruling by seeing that actually everything belongs to Krishna, everything belongs to the ultimate communism aspect, which is Krishna. But we are just caretakers for a temporary period of time, taking charge of looking after the Lord's property because he's given it to us to look after. And so what we can take away is that whenever we get anything or something of value, we can realize that actually this doesn't belong to me. This belongs to Krishna. So let us give it back to Krishna. Let us look after it and utilize it for Krishna. So many of us will be working and we might be getting different skills at work or even at home or, whatever we're doing, students. We can utilize those skills in Krishna's service. Many of us will be getting money. Okay, yes, we need money to survive. We need money for food, clothes, shelter, etc. Savings, retirement plans. But we can also use some of that money to donate to Krishna. Many of us will be having, all of us will be having time available. Instead of utilizing that time watching Netflix and Star Plus and ZTV and all these different TV channels, we can use that time and engage it in giving back to Krishna, in helping a Krishna project, like this Learning Bhagavatam, like London CVS, like School of Bhakti, something that helps contribute to Krishna's cause. So like this, we can realize that everything belongs to Krishna, and whatever we realize belongs to Krishna, we can utilize some aspect of it for Krishna's service. And so a spiritual leader doesn't actually claim proprietorship over anything, but he accepts whatever comes his way and uses that and utilizes it to engage in service to the Lord. Verse 11. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead constantly watches the activities of the world No one sees him. However, one should not think that because no one sees him, he does not see, for his power to see is never diminished. Therefore, everyone should worship the super soul, who always stays with the individual soul as a friend. Here, the lesson I take away is that a spiritual leader perceives God everywhere. Every day in the temple, we chant the Noshama Arti, the Noshama prayers. And in the second stanza, we sing, Ito Narsima, Parato Narsima, Yato Yato Yami Tato Narsima, Bahir Narsima, Hridaye Narsima, Narasimha Madim Sharanam Prapadye. We sing, Ito Narsima, Parato Narsima. Narsimadev, Supreme Lord, you are over here, but you're also over there. Yato Yato Yami Tato Narsima. Wherever I look, wherever I go, I see you are there. Bahir Narsima, Hridaye Narsima. If I'm looking outside of me, I see you're there. And if I look inside my heart, I see you're there also. Narsimhamadim Sharanam Prapadya. To that Supreme Lord, Narsimadev, who is everywhere, I offer my humble obeisances. Because that is the vision of a devotee. That is the vision of a spiritual leader who sees and perceives that Krishna is everywhere. And how do they see that? In the purport, Srila Prabhupada describes that a devotee will see God everywhere because he has jnana chakshush, the vision of knowledge, the eye to see everything through the lens of knowledge. So a devotee can see that actually inside the heart, the super soul is always there, overseeing whatever we're doing, overseeing the desires we have, overseeing the intentions we have. And he's also outside because he's in each and every atom as the super soul, but also as the proprietor and the owner. And so if we want to perceive God everywhere, we also have to develop that jnana chakshush, that vision of knowledge. And how do we do that? Well, every time we listen to a class, every time we give a class, or many of us, even when we're studying the scriptures or reading the Bhagavatam or the Bhagavad Gita, we start with the Mangalacharan, and the very first verse of the Mangalacharan is Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. We are praying that and mentioning, describing how we were born in the ignorance or the darkest ignorance. And somebody comes to open our eyes with the torch of knowledge. Who is that somebody? The spiritual master. Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. To that spiritual master, I offer my obeisances. And so the way to develop that Jnana Chakshush such that we can see the Supreme Lord everywhere is by taking shelter of a guru, taking shelter of somebody who sees the super soul, who sees the Supreme Lord everywhere they go. Because such a person, such an elevated personality can actually open our eyes with the torch of knowledge. And so under their guidance, we study the scriptures. And when we sincerely hear from the spiritual teachers, when we sincerely and seriously study Srila Prabhupada's books, what we find is that through that sincerity and through that integrity of our study and attitude of service, we find that we're able to take account of the Lord in our daily affairs. We're able to start to perceive him everywhere. And even if we can't see him directly, we can see his presence behind everything that's happening. We can see how he's making things, molding things in our life in a way that brings him closer to him. And so spiritual leaders aren't those who try to see God directly. They're actually those who See God's hand in everything that's happening. That's what a spiritual leader is doing. Verse 12. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has no beginning, no end, and no middle. Nor does he belong to a particular person or nation. He has no inside or outside. The dualities found within this material world, such as beginning and end, mine and theirs, are all absent from the personality of the Supreme Lord. The universe which emanates from him is another feature of the Lord. Therefore, the Supreme Lord is the ultimate truth, and he is complete in greatness. Here we see that the Lord is actually beyond all of the conceptions and dualities. And so the lesson I see here is that a spiritual leader recognizes God's greatness. He recognizes that the Lord is not affected by anything of this material nature or anything of a material concept. Material things go through 6 stages of life, right? Everything has a manufacture date and everything has an expiry date. What are the 6 phases? We see that everything comes into being, everything is created. Everything material has a creation. And then after that creation, it grows for some time. And then the third thing that happens is that it sticks around. It remains for some time. And oftentimes it will produce byproducts. And then eventually, as its shelf life comes closer to an end, it starts to dwindle and then ultimately dies or is destroyed. Let me just take this phone as an example. Right? We see, okay, the phone was created. It came into existence. It was created. How is it growing? Well, everything has a capacity. My phone has a capacity. And every time I'm using it, it's growing in, the capacity is staying the same, but how much it's storing is increasing. When I bought the phone, it had like a 10, 20 megabyte storage usage. Now it's probably maxed out at 100 gigs or whatever it is. It's growing. Then it remains for some time. I'm able to use it. It's just going on, it's continuing, and I'm just using it for some time. Produces byproducts. How is a phone producing byproducts? Well, nowadays, our smartphones have so many apps, and those apps are connected to our account that the account, even if the phone is destroyed, the account lives on because the app we just download on another phone. After the byproducts, it dwindles. At some point, the phone starts being sluggish. It starts processing speed, the capacity, it starts diminishing. And then we start thinking, okay, I need a new phone now. The phone gets cracked. Everything starts to go and give way. And eventually, with phones, we can do this. We can say, okay, let me sell it off. Let me throw it away, get a new phone. But the same happens with the body. We see somebody is born, through young age, they grow, they get to a certain age, and they just stay the same height for many, many years, hopefully. Oftentimes, people start to shrink very quickly. They produce byproducts with children and so many other things that they create in the world. And then it comes a point where their body starts giving way. They start dwindling, whether it's old age, disease, or something. And then ultimately the body perishes. They die. And everything in the material world has these 6 stages, these 6 phases. But the Lord, we know, is beyond all of that. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. The Supreme Lord is actually Ishvara Parama Krishna. He's a supreme controller. He's got an eternal, blissful, full of knowledge, spiritual body. Anadir Adir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. He's actually the origin of everything, and he has no other origin. He's the source of everything. And Sarvakarana Karanam. He's the cause. He's the prime cause behind every other cause. So he is the ultimate creator. He's the ultimate creation. Just see how great the Lord is. Because he's beyond material creation. He's beyond the dualities. And so a spiritual leader is able to see that the Supreme Lord is so great. And there's a nice story that many of us may have heard about Narada Muni and the Brahman and the cobbler. Well, one day Narada Muni was going to see Lord Narayana, and as he was traveling through space, he comes to planet Earth and he sees that, oh, he comes across a Brahmana and he goes, oh, Mr. Brahmana, I'm planning to go to see the Supreme Lord. Would you like me to take a message? And the Brahmana says, yes, yes. Ask the Supreme Lord, when will I attain moksha? When will I be liberated? It's like Narada Muni is, okay, I will ask him. And he travels a bit further and he comes across a shoemaker, a cobbler. And he asks the same question. Oh, Mr. Cobbler, I am going to see the Supreme Lord. Would you like me to take a message? Yes, yes. Ask when I will be liberated. When will I be free of this shoemaking duty? And so Narada Muni then goes to the Supreme Lord, to Lord Narayana, and has his conversation, then mentions, oh yeah, by the way, I met this Brahmana and a cobbler, and they're asking, when will they be free? When will they be liberated? And Lord Narayan basically explains to Narada Muni that, okay, tell the Brahmana that he still has many, many lifetimes. Can't remember how many, I think 1,000 lifetimes, and then he will be liberated. And tell the cobbler that you just need to finish off your duty in this life, and then you come back to me. So Narada Muni is confused. But the Brahmana is studying the scriptures, the Brahmana is doing so many rituals, so many activities to worship you. Why is he going to come after 1,000 lifetimes, whereas this cobbler who's just polishing shoes every day will come back after this life? Instead of asking directly, Lord Narayan explains, okay, you'll understand the answer when they ask you what is the Supreme Lord doing, then tell them that the Supreme Lord, your Lord Narayana, is threading an elephant through the eye of a needle. And so Narada Muni is confused, he's baffled, but he goes and he comes and sees the Brahmana first. He speaks to the Brahmana and explains, oh yes, I met the Supreme Lord. He said that you will come back to him after 1,000 lifetimes. Huh? 1,000 lifetimes? Are you sure? Are you sure you met the Supreme Lord? Tell me, what was the Supreme Lord doing? And so Narada Muni explains, he was threading an elephant through the eye of a needle. And the Brahmana is thinking that Narada Muni has gone a bit crazy. He's gone a bit cuckoo. Maybe he's had a drink or two. He doesn't understand what he's saying. And so the Brahmana just dismisses Narada Muni. It's like, okay, you didn't go see the Supreme Lord. Be gone. So Narada Muni is baffled. He's like, okay. And then he goes to the cobbler. And when he meets the cobbler, again, they have a conversation, nice conversation. And then Narada Muni is like, oh, yes, I met the Supreme Lord. And he said, you will come back to him after this very lifetime. Oh my gosh, so amazing. My Lord is so merciful. My Lord is so great. What was the Lord doing when you were speaking to him, when you were meeting him? What did he say? What was he doing? So Narada Muni explains the exact same thing. The Supreme Lord, Lord Narayana, was taking an elephant and threading it through the eye of a needle. And the cobbler just starts, oh my gosh, he starts just loving the Lord even more. He's like, oh my gosh, my Lord is so great. Amazing that he's doing things like this. And Narada Muni is like confused. You believe me? The Brahmana didn't believe me, but you're believing me? And so that the cobbler explains that, why not? The Lord is so great that within a tree, there are so many fruits. Within those fruits, there are seeds. And from those seeds come so many trees. If within this one seed, he can create so many millions of trees, why can he not take an elephant and thread it through the eye of the needle? And like this, we hear about how the cobbler had strong faith in the greatness of the Lord. And the cobbler wasn't amazed at the fact that the Lord was doing something like this, doing something like threading an elephant through the needle. For him, it was like, yeah, the Lord is just going to do amazing things all the time. But for us, many of us will see everything material and be so amazed by it. But a spiritual leader isn't caught up by the shining stars and the glitters of the world around us or around them. They're just marveling at God who transcends it all because their focus is on the Lord. Verse 13. The entire cosmic manifestation is the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, who has millions of names and unlimited potencies. He is self-effulgent, unborn, and changeless. He's the beginning of everything, but he has no beginning. Because he has created this cosmic manifestation by his external energy, the universe appears to be created, maintained, and annihilated by him. Nonetheless, he remains inactive in his spiritual energy and is untouched by the activities of the material energy. Yeah. So here we see the spiritual leaders practice connecting with God. We see in the very first line how it's described that the Supreme Personality of God, the Absolute Truth, who has millions of names and unlimited potencies. If you want to get to know somebody, if you want to develop a relationship with someone, what do you have to do? You have to connect with them. You have to speak to them. You have to try and understand them. You have to try and hear from them. You have to ask questions. You have to really get to know them, right? You have to really speak to them and inquire from them and hear from them. And so if we want to understand how great God is, if we want to have the vision to see God everywhere, then we need to understand God, which is done by connecting with him. And the simplest and most sublime way that the scriptures and Srila Prabhupada gives us, and even Krishna himself gives us, is the process of bhakti, which begins with the chanting of his holy names. In the Shikshashtakam, which are 8 verses given to us by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we see in the very second verse, it's described, the glory of the holy name is described as being infused with all of the potencies that Krishna has. All of the unlimited potencies that Swayambhuva Manu is just glorifying in this verse that we just read are present in his holy names, because Krishna's names are actually non-different to Krishna himself. And so when we chant Krishna's names, then not only are we connecting with Krishna's names, but we actually come face to face with Krishna. Acharyas described that actually when we sing or when we chant Krishna's names, then Krishna himself comes to dance on the tongue. That's not just a metaphorical point. The Lord himself actually comes to dance. And so when we study the scriptures, when we chant Krishna's names, when we serve the Guru, then what happens is that we actually come in connection, we come in contact with the spiritual energy, which helps us understand the Lord and be in touch with the Lord, because all of these activities connect us to the platform that the Lord himself is present. And when we chant or connect to that spiritual energy, many of us will have experience of this, where even if it's just for that moment, we find that our consciousness gets elevated, where the paradigm of our thoughts shifts from the concerns and the madness of material life to the tranquility that we can experience on the transcendental platform. Right? Many of us will have experience of that. But even if for that moment, if we're very intentionally, intensely, and sincerely chanting Krishna's names, we'll find that all of the material woes that we have just vanish. And we feel really connected and peaceful on a transcendental level. Oftentimes I give this description that is very much like taking a plane. Many of us are probably living in London, and busy streets of London. If you go to central London, you see there's big, big buildings, almost like skyscrapers. New York is even worse. Everywhere around you, there's noise, big buildings, and you can feel overwhelmed by everything around you. But what happens is when you take a plane, all of the skyscraper, all those big buildings start to become like small, small matchsticks. All of the noise that's looming in the city atmosphere, it's still there, but it starts to become part of the background noise. Your consciousness, your immediate focus is no longer amidst all of that chaos. It's starting to function from above the chaos. And so the noise is still there. The chaos of life is still there. It's not that you start chanting, some people have this misconception that if I chant, all my problems will go away. No, no, no. The problems will still be there for you to deal with, but your consciousness will be at such a greater dimension. You'll be coming to the problems from a greater dimension, from a transcendental dimension, that the problems don't no longer feel like problems. They just feel like little hurdles to overcome. Or as Krishna describes the material world is like an ocean, but one who takes shelter of the Supreme Lord, one who chants his names, he makes the ocean contract into the size of a hoofprint. The water's still there, but our consciousness to be able to tackle that water, to tackle that ocean, is so much greater. And so spiritual leaders, they keep themselves spiritually nourished and transcendently connected by regularly calling out God's names. Because they are always chanting, they're always giving time and attention to their spiritual practice. They're able to always function from above the noise instead of functioning from within the noise. Conscious of time, so try and speed through the last three. Text 14. Therefore, to enable people to reach the stage of activities that are not tinged by fruitive results, great saints first engage people in fruitive activities. For unless one begins by performing activities as recommended in the Shastras, one cannot reach the stage of liberation or activities that produce no reactions. The lesson I took away from this is that spiritual leaders endeavor to please Krishna or please God. We see that the whole world is constantly rushing around to try and make their plans become a reality. Whether the plans become a reality or not, we see that they're chasing after what is described as chapala sukha, flickering happiness. Because the world is actually in the Bhagavad Gita described as dukhalaya, a place which is full of misery, suffering actually. Because what happens in the world is that we think we're searching after happiness, but all we're actually finding is cessation of suffering. It's just a temporary negation of the suffering or consciousness about the suffering and the misery that we've got in our life. Srila Prabhupada often describes it in the form of an itch, where if somebody's got an itch, right, then it's inconvenient, it's disturbing. And so what do they want to do? They want to scratch it. So they scratch it for some time, and what happens is that they experience joy and happiness. Oh my gosh, I'm no longer itching. But are you actually happy just because you relieved yourself from that itch? No, you've just found yourself in a situation where you're not feeling the suffering and the misery. Because what happens the next moment? The itch comes back. If it doesn't come back in the same place, now you're itching somewhere else. Now you want to scratch somewhere else. So like this the material life, material world is very much like that. You go and try and deal with the problem over here. Say, okay, yes, now I'm free from the problem. I am happy. But actually, there's a whole 100 other problems waiting to happen for you. And so temporary solutions can't actually make us happy because all these solutions are just dealing with issues that are happening in life. That doesn't bring us happiness. And so if one wants to actually get out of that network of suffering, that network of inconvenience in the material world, then one has to engage in activities searching for not our own pleasure, but the pleasure of Krishna, according to the scriptures that are given. Because when we Srila Prabhupada often gives the analogy of watering a plant. How do you nourish a plant? You could water the leaves, you could water the stem, you could water the flowers, whatever it is. But the way to nourish the plant is by watering the roots. When you give water to the roots, the whole flower will flourish. And in the same way, instead of searching for the pleasure of ourself or somebody else, which will be a leaf or a flower on that plant, let's focus on nourishing the roots, which is pleasing Krishna. And when Krishna is pleased, the whole society, ourselves, we will all also feel that joy and happiness. And so we should look to do things to satisfy and please Krishna, because that's the way to make spiritual advancement. And as we make spiritual advancement, what we find is that the taste for material things diminishes. We develop a higher taste in life. And so whatever position we're in, we can always find some way to connect to Krishna, some way to please Krishna in whatever position. And that's why Krishna has given us the whole Varnashram system. Varna is our personality traits, our skill sets, and ashram is the social status in life that we've got. In whatever skill sets we've got, whatever personality we've got, and whatever social position in life we've got, whether we're a student, a householder, a renunciate, whatever it is, Krishna has given us a path, a mechanism, a practice for us to connect with him through that situation. And all of that is given to us in the scriptures. And all we have to do is study the scriptures in a way to learn how to please Krishna. And so spiritual leaders aren't those who try to see God. They're those who actually act in a way that God will want to see them, because they're acting to please Krishna and not please themselves. Verse 15. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is full in opulence by his own gain, yet he acts as the creator, maintainer, and annihilator of this material world. In spite of acting in that way, he is never entangled. Hence, devotees who follow in his footsteps are also never entangled. Here, the lesson that I took away is that spiritual leaders follow God's instructions. If we want to please Krishna, then what better way to please Krishna than find out what does Krishna say about how to please him? If Dharmendra wants to please me, Dharmendra could be like, I enjoy pizza and chips and pasta. I'm going to feed that to Bhaja Govindam Das. But what if Bhaja Govindam says, actually, I don't like pizzas, chips, and pastas. I like dal, sabji, roti. If Dharmendra really wants to please me, he can find out from me, okay, what would you like? What do you like? And in that way, he will find out what is it that I want from Dharmendra, and then Dharmendra can give that to me. In the same way, Krishna gives us the scriptures for us to find out how can we please Krishna. Some people have this notion that Krishna comes in their dreams and tells them exactly what he wants, but the scriptures are there. Oftentimes, sometimes they may well be true, but oftentimes they're probably figments of our imagination. And so, how do we know what Krishna wants from us? Well, a very standard statement from the Bhagavad Gita that we hear, which is repeated actually twice in the Bhagavad Gita itself. Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mame veshyasi satyam te pratijane priyosi me. Krishna says, become my devotee, worship me, always think of me, offer your homage unto me, pay your obeisances to me. And like that, you will come to me without fail. And so the way to please Krishna is by following what he wants, which is becoming a devotee. And in the purport of verse 15, Prabhupada explains that there's 3 ways to become a devotee, 3 things that are required. Chant Hare Krishna, worship the deity, and offer your obeisances to the Supreme Lord and Sri Guru. 3 very simple things that all of us can do at home, in the temple, wherever we are. Chant Hare Krishna, worship the deity. It doesn't have to be murti, it could be a picture, and offer our obeisances to the Lord and to spiritual master, to the Guru. And so, yeah, so we can do these things, and in that way, we can also connect with Krishna. We can also transcend from the bondage that the material world has for us. And so, spiritual leaders don't manufacture their own path to success. They actually follow the path given by God. They follow what the scriptures say and try and implement that in their own lives. And then verse 16. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, works just like an ordinary human being, yet he does not desire to enjoy the fruits of work. He is full in knowledge, free from material desires and diversions, and completely independent. As a supreme teacher of human society, he teaches his own way of activities, and thus he inaugurates the real path of religion. And the most important part, I request everyone to follow him. The very last verse of Swayambhuva Manu's meditation. The lesson that I take away is that a spiritual leader spreads God's glories. We hear the very last sentence, I request everyone to follow him. Through these verses, Swayambhuva Manu has glorified the Lord in so many different ways. And at the very end, he says, please, everyone surrender to him. Please, everyone follow what he is saying and doing. Because the Lord himself comes to establish the path of spiritual success. And so leadership isn't just about leading our subordinates to achieve something of great success in the material world, but it's also to inspire and encourage and support their journey and progress in their spiritual life as well. And as we know from the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 18, the very famous section, where Krishna says that one who spreads Krishna's message, like the Bhagavad Gita, and encourages people on the path of devotion is very dear to me. And so, like this, we see that the spiritual leaders of society, they actually have great compassion and care for the soul's spiritual success and not just the person's material progress. And so like this, there were 8 lessons that I just wanted to share and take away from these 8 verses of Swayambhuva Manu's meditation, a leader's meditation. And in that way, I'm hoping that some of these lessons we can take into our own lives and meditate on them, make them our own meditation. So just to recap, the 8 are from verse 9. Remember, it all begins with God. Verse 10. See, everything belongs to God. Verse 11. Perceive God everywhere. Verse 12. Recognize God's greatness. 13. Practice connecting with God. Verse 14. Endeavor to please God. Verse 15. Follow God's instructions. And verse 16. Spread God's glories. So end there. I'm conscious I'm over time. But Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. That was really beautiful. If anyone has any questions, please do raise your hand. Okay. If I just start off with a couple, I think you've answered them through this, but I think it's good to reflect on it again. So, how do you ensure that your faith in God does not diminish due to changes in happiness and distress?
That's really nice. One of the biggest things that I've learned and that we see in these prayers as well is practice connecting with God. When we're chanting and also when we're studying or staying connected to the scriptures, what happens is that our intelligence at least will be strengthened. Sometimes we give the analogy or the example of spiritual life is like walking a tightrope. Where you're walking on the tightrope, but at every step you could slip. You know, happiness, the extreme emotions of happiness and distress could make you slip as well. But what happens is that underneath that tightrope, you have different nets. If you ever look at if you ever go to a circus or see online when they're walking a tightrope in a very elevated platform, there's different safety nets that are given. So if they slip, they don't fall and crash. They slip and they have a safety net. And so in spiritual life, we have different safety nets. For the intelligence, it's the scriptures. association is key also, staying in connection with the devotees who then keep us in balance, you know? They'll be like, oh, Dharmendra, you're getting very upset about this. You know, let's help you come out of the distress so that you can see how Krishna is acting in that situation. And like this, association is key. Staying connected to the scriptures is key. Chanting regularly is key. Our habits, developing the mode of goodness is key because the routine that we develop from the mode of goodness keeps us in check as well. So like this, different things are given.
Okay, thank you very much, Prabhu. Uh, the second question I had, and I'm hoping that others will ask now, because then my questions will be exhausted, by the way. So when the way I saw this canto is, from my perception, is all about surrender, because obviously, you know, the various context, the various things like Gajendra Maharaj and Bali Maharaj, so forth. So how do you know that you're following the path to surrender to Krishna in the right way? How do you know that you're actually surrendering correctly? What are the sort of symptoms and conditions that you should sort of be feeling so that you understand that you're going towards that path correctly?
Interesting question. How do we know Krishna is being pleased by our endeavors, if I put it in a different way?
Correct. Yeah.
It's interesting because sometimes when we say, how do we know Krishna is pleased? Sometimes, and I've done this, please do not laugh. I've gone to the deity and been like, is he smiling? Is his face smiling? I'm like, I'm not elevated enough to see whether he's smiling or not, you know? To him, he's always smiling because that's how Krishna is. But how can we really understand? So something that I was told quite early on actually is that the way to know if Krishna is pleased is if the devotees around us are pleased. Part of Krishna consciousness is learning to be personal. And we see that when different grades of devotees are described, Kanishta, Madhyama, Uttama, we see descriptions of Kanishta being described as those who see Krishna in the temple, on the altar, but can't see Krishna around them in the people. And so if we develop that attitude and that acknowledgement and understanding that actually Krishna being pleased isn't just about me doing X, Y, Z. It's about how am I carrying myself such that those around me are pleased. And it's not just devotees in the sense of, you know, we see, okay, somebody's got Kantimala Tilak initiated. That's not just a devotee because everybody is part and parcel of Krishna. So are people around me pleased or are they in anxiety because of me? Are they being disturbed because of me? If that's happening, then maybe, just maybe, we're not doing something which is pleasing Krishna. Now, there is a fine line because, you know, there'll be certain people who are envious, etc., and then we're like, you know, they're not pleased, maybe I'm doing something wrong. But that's where we also take shelter of Guru Sadhu Shastra, where we understand, okay, is what I'm doing in line with the scripture? Is what I'm doing something given to me by my spiritual master? Is what I'm doing recommended and suggested by spiritual seniors who I look up to, I take guidance from? And we can bounce off of them to understand, okay, is this thing that I've done pleasing to Krishna or not? So I guess two different stark differences. One is see around you and if the devotees are pleased, and the other is check in with Guru Sadhu Shastra to see if what you're doing is the right path.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Before we say our three Hari Bols, could I ask yourself, Prabhuji, to say the final prayers? And if I could ask everyone to stay on mute while that's being said. So I'll just share it with you as well, Prabhu. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubheva cha patitanam pavnebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Anant
Jai.
Koti Vaishnavrind ki jai. Shri
Jai.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Thank you.
Hare
Okay.
Krishna.